it's like a triathlon, right? Like you finish one thing and then like you immediately start the another thing.
CK Kim. He's a serial tech entrepreneur who recently completed his second exit, exceeding $500 million. To recover, CK took a year-long sabbatical. During his travels, he reflected on his experiences and distilled his insights into clear and powerful ideas.
When you think about like, hey, I want to sell the company too much, then ironically, those companies never get sold.
Sounds like dating.
Exactly.
We're too desperate
Yeah.
now we want to. In this episode, we discuss the secrets to post-exit happiness, the impact of the sale on his young family, and the excitement of supporting startup founders. CK, thank you so much to come into my show today. I really appreciate it. Really excited about this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Super excited.
I would love us to start with a brief story of your how you ended up here, being an exited, semi-retired founder.
So I started and sold 2 companies, and I got super lucky because the first company we started got acquired in 2008, right before the financial crisis. And the second company we started got acquired in 2021. And we all know what happened in 2022. So timing-wise, we got super lucky. But I've always wanted to start my own company. And I was always attracted to the whole like startup and entrepreneurs world, even when I was working at big companies. So it was really, really great opportunity for me to start these companies with other awesome people. And my background is more about like in content creation space. I love to like build content publishing tools for content creators. So the first company we started was a blogging company back in Korea. I'm originally from Korea. And we started this company during the Web 2.0 boom, where blogging was, all of a sudden like a really cool way of like creating content for the web. And we started this company in 2006, right around the Web 2.0 was becoming an important trend. And we got acquired by Google, and we ended up joining the Blogger team. And Blogger, of course, is a relatively old tool. I mean, even when we were joining, it was a pretty old tool. So our team joined and really helped kind of revamping, updating the tool, Blogger tool. And then I started the second company after Google, which was called Tapas Media. And we were in the mobile publishing space. So we helped content creators and storytellers to tell their stories in a serialized format for mobile audience. And we started the company in 2012. And this was when mobile was booming in the US. And Instagram was picking up, becoming very popular, and maybe like we were around iPhone like 6 or 5 back in 2012, but everyone was going for mobile, and because we were coming from the content creation space, publishing tool space, we were thinking, okay, so blogging was for Web 2.0 and web for the most part, and what is the equivalent version for mobile? So we thought a lot about what does storytelling and content creation mean for mobile. So we started that company and got acquired by a Korean company called Kakao in 2021. So that's been my journey.
You live in LA now. When did you move? Was it in connection with the Google acquisition?
No, so Google brought our family to California. So I'm originally from Korea and studied in Michigan, but we started the first company in Korea, and we got acquired by Google. And the first couple of years I was working at the Google Korea office, and then I transferred to Mountain View, and that's when I brought my whole family to California. But we were in the Northern California Bay Area for about 10 years, and then we moved to LA in 2020. So it's been about 4 years.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, as you know, like during the pandemic, a whole bunch of people moved, right? So I guess we were part of that whole like a migration trend, but the pandemic started and we were all working from home, and me and my wife, we were like thinking, hey, maybe we can bring some change and, let's go to LA because, LA is relatively close from the Bay Area, but still different. So yeah, we were always kind of thinking like maybe we can try different places, different cities, but we finally pulled the trigger.
So let's go back to that moment when you sold Tapas. How did you feel?
No, that was really interesting. I remember like taking a long walk. So like what happened was our company was growing well, and we were going out there to raise funding. This was our Series C funding, Series C, and then we actually got term sheet really quickly. Luckily, we got term sheet from one of the great venture capital firms. They really liked our growth, and so we were pretty much ready to keep going. And then what happened was this company Kakao was already our shareholder, so they were a strategic investor in our company. So as you know, when you try to raise money, you have to go back to the original shareholders and get the approval from them. So that's when the conversation happened. So we were like, hey, we're trying to raise more money, keep going, and can you approve this deal? And then as a shareholder, existing shareholder, they wanted to put more investment in. It's like, hey, why do you raise money from other people? Like, we can invest more.
Yeah.
But then if we took more funding from Kakao, then it was going to be too much shareholding for us. So we kind of resisted that idea. It's like, hey, we want to be independent. We want to raise money from like a financial investor and keep going. And then there was some like back and forth, and then that became like a strategic acquisition discussion.
Yeah.
So at that point, I remember like me and my wife, we were taking long walks and giving a lot of thoughts because on one hand, this is your baby, right? So you want to keep going, and you can almost see like, hey, if we raise this money and then deploy the capital in the right way, let's say after 5 years, this can become like much bigger. Or on the other hand, it's like, hey, we can be acquired and be part of like this, other company that has a lot more resources than us. So this can be another interesting angle. So yeah, there was a lot of deliberation, and but we finally made a decision to sell the company because our company was becoming more and more depending on like big IP, like story IPs, and it just takes so much capital and time to develop the IPs in-house. So that was, I think, like the key decision for us. So yeah, we decided to sell the company, and from there it was just like a matter of like closing the deal. And when finally the deal was signed, how did it feel? Very interesting feeling. Very happy. Of course, it was great outcome for everybody involved. It's like a mix of like a bunch of different feelings, I guess.
So you were happy for a while, or are you still happy? Do you have any regrets about selling?
I don't have any regret. It was a great outcome for everybody involved. So that was really, really great for myself and our team. And, I could see some of our team members becoming like, getting the economic benefit, which made me happy as well. Of course, like after the acquisition, there's the usual sort of like, we're now part of big company, and then there's, some friction there because like culture is different, and there has been some of those, obviously, but for the most part, I was really grateful for the opportunity that was given. So yeah, no regret.
So are you involved on a day-to-day basis still?
No, so I was involved in the company for almost 2 years, a year and 9 months. But then I left in 2023, last year, January. So I'm not involved in the company anymore. So yeah, after the acquisition, I was involved for about 2 years, but I left.
How was it? Just between you and me? I won't tell anyone.
No, it was super like relieving, of course, right? The first like couple of weeks is always interesting. I mean, anybody who has been working for like a long time, and then like, you leave the company, the first couple of weeks are always the most like weird time because your schedule is empty, right? And for me personally, I was doing a lot of late night calls because I was working with Korea a lot, and like my dinner would be like 8 p.m. at a minimum because so like 4 p.m. Pacific, like where I am, like 4 p.m. 5 p.m. That's when Asia wakes up and starts working. So it's like a whole another day starting.
Yeah.
And of course, I start my day normally, just like U.S. team members. I start my day like early in the morning, and then you work with the team. And like 4 p.m., 5 p.m., it's like a whole another day starting because you get like so many messages and emails coming in. And, like I lived in that mode for like such a long time. So from there to like, let's say January 2nd or January 3rd, you wake up and then your Google Calendar is completely empty and no appointment whatsoever. So like, that's such a weird feeling, but also very relieving too.
Of course.
And yeah, of course, like the first like couple of weeks, you're like, hey, what, how should I fill my day? But of course, after that, you find the rhythm, you find the structure. So I wasn't like as meticulous as like when I was working full time in terms of like managing my calendar, but I was able to kind of get into some sort of rhythm and cycle afterwards. But the first couple of weeks was kind of like strange.
On your LinkedIn profile, you actually describe yourself as a recovering founder, which I guess it's your temporary identity, right? While you're figuring out where you be. How is that recovery going so far?
Yeah, recovery wise, I mean, when you say recovery, I think it can mean different things, right? It's not just like a PTSD kind of thing necessarily. It's also like unwiring your brain in a certain way, because when you're working on a specific project for a long time, like your brain is like really wired to to that specific project.
Yeah.
It's like you're going super deep and super narrow. So then it takes a certain amount of time to kind of get out of that and unwind yourself so that your brain can be more flexible and then can receive other things. So I think to do that, you need a little bit of time, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to take some time off and then just kind of do nothing so that my brain can be like unwound a little bit.
This is very wise, and
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that you're doing it, because I see so many people who are just being carried by this momentum, and they jump into some other activity and they make long-term commitments without letting themselves heal and rest and recover and prepare for the next stage. So it's wonderful that you're doing it.
Yeah, I think it's like athletes too, right? Athletes, when they finish like a race, then like they have adrenaline and they're like still like pumped up, right? So then they're like, hey, what do I do next? And then like some people, it's like a triathlon, right? Like you finish one thing and then like you immediately start another thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for me, I made a conscious choice to take some time off, partly because I realized I never took any time off. I mean, in my case, it's one of those cases where like you finish the deal, like you close the deal on Friday, and then the next like Monday you start working on this new project. So like for me, it was lucky in a sense because everything kind of continued, right? So I was lucky in that sense. But then in the meantime, I didn't have any chance to like take some meaningful amount of time off. So I really wanted to take some time off. And the other thing I'm also realizing is, for me, like the fact that we got acquired by this big company and then had a little bit of work experience at the big company. Of course, there has been those like frictions here and there, and then because of like a different culture, there has been some clash. But for the most part, that was a blessing because I realized when I see some other entrepreneurs who sold their companies to not just like big companies, another big company, but like private equity firms or some other circumstances where you are like going from like 100 to 0 like the next day. I've seen some cases where like the founders have to leave their company like tomorrow and then not like carry anything. So like that's such a great momentum shift. And for those founders, the identity crisis and it's like it's more pronounced.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the fact that I was involved in the acquired company at least a little bit was a blessing.
So it didn't bother you that you suddenly had the boss and became an employee. It does seem to bother quite a lot of people.
Yeah, that's another thing because again, this acquiring company was already a shareholder. So I knew the people really well. So I think that was another factor that made the transition easier. And of course, the working relationship became different, right? Because previously it was like partner company, you know them, they're your investor. So there's that relationship, investor to founder relationship. But now that same person became a boss, somebody that I reported to. So it became like a slightly different working relationship, but just the fact that I knew those people from before, I think that was helpful.
Sort of at the later stage of the company's story, did you already dream about the exit? Would you say that became your dream? You wanted to do that?
Yes and no, I think. I mean, I think it'll be like every single entrepreneur, if they don't think about some sort of exit, I mean, they're like lying to themselves, right? So it really depends on like the terms and like, hey, who is acquiring the company? So anytime a good deal happens, a prospective deal happens, then all the entrepreneurs that I know, they'll be open to consider at least. But the other thing though is I've seen like other founders who are thinking about it too much, and then when you think about like, hey, I want to sell the company too much, then ironically those companies never get sold, and the companies that get acquired are the companies that don't need to get sold. It's like, I mean, as they say, the companies are only sold, not
Sounds like dating.
exactly.
You're too desperate, nobody
Yeah.
wants you.
There's so many, as you know, like dating, parallels between dating and startups. But yeah, as you mentioned, exactly. So you shouldn't think about it too much. But in the meantime, you got to be at least like open to consider if there's a good deal coming up.
No, absolutely. So I'm curious what your dream is now. I know you're very early in this post-exit transition, but I'm sure you've started thinking of what that ideal life would be for you.
Yeah, so I took the entire 2023 off. So that was a really, really good time for me. I did a lot of traveling. I spent a lot of time with my family. But in the meantime, I did a lot of soul searching. I did every single, like I was reading a lot of materials, and I learned about Ikigai. I learned about a bunch of other kind of framework, and I used a lot of those. But for me, it was relatively simple, I would say, because I knew that no matter what I do, I would stay within the startup industry, especially early stage tech startups, because that's been my identity the whole life, and that's something that I still want to do.
Yeah.
So regardless of in which capacity I'll be in the industry, I knew that I will always be in the startup industry. So at least like that part was clear. And I think anybody who does like soul searching, I guess like number one thing to consider is to kind of set the boundary conditions. It's like, hey, because it's just difficult to consider everything. Like if you go back to like drawing board and then, hey, everything's up in the air, then it's just like too overwhelming. So I think the number one step is to think about, hey, what are the grounding factors? What are some of the boundary conditions that I can play with, within? So then it became relatively simple choice because I learned that, hey, maybe there can be like 2 or 3 different paths I can choose from. So at least it's not like a 1 out of 7. It's just 1 out of 2 or 3. And those 3 were, the first path was, some sort of investor venture capital route, just because a lot of people like me, as they get older, it's like, hey, you're exited founder, you get older, your brain doesn't really function, as well. So they become some sort of like mentor / investor figure. Just like, sports players, they become like coaches.
Yeah.
Or you do another thing. I mean, you get back into the game and then start another company, but this time maybe like, you can recruit like a better team, and then like, trusting the team more and giving opportunity to younger people. but you're still like, back in like 0 to 1 game. And I mean, there are other relatively minor kind of like, paths you can take, such as venture studio. I've seen like a whole bunch of people starting venture studios. They're like launching companies off the ground, but then like fundamentally working with other entrepreneurs. Or you can also like join big companies, or you can like do private equity type of thing where you acquire companies and, rather than 0 to 1, you're doing like a 1 to 10 kind of thing. So there are other paths, but for me, it really came down to, do I want to be some sort of VC, or do I want to kind of get back into like the game? And I realized, this was a year-long kind of exploration. Like I looked at, a lot of different aspects. I talked to a bunch of different people, but I realized, I'm still a builder, and I wanted to build another company. So there was like the thing that I wanted to do, but then there's also the other factors, such as like, what are some of the things that I wouldn't enjoy? So it was as much like about the things that I wouldn't enjoy as it was about the things that I would enjoy. So then I kind of visualized myself being a VC, and then like thought about like the day to day there. And there are certain aspects that I liked, but then there are also certain aspects that I didn't really like, such as, if you're a VC, you have to kind of like, put yourself out there, become some sort of brand, meeting a lot of people. I'm a relatively private person, so I didn't really know about that aspect of like putting yourself out there a lot. And then after that, like, you have to like say no to like 99% of the people that you meet. And, that was another aspect that I didn't particularly like. And, of course, there's always the aspect of like, you're never like, if you're a VC, you're never doing things yourself. You're ultimately supporting other entrepreneurs. Yeah. So you're not in the arena, you're like supporting from the sidelines. So yeah, based on those factors, I thought that I would still be a founder. So yeah.
I interviewed someone, the interview is not out yet, who spent a few years being a VC after their exit. And do you know why they stopped doing it? They just hated saying no all the time. He said that there were all these amazing entrepreneurs, and they were so driven, and they just had to say no all the time, and he got tired of it. And I thought it was quite interesting.
That's a good point. And also you have to understand the VC game, right? I mean, VC fundamentally, you're like working with other people's capital, and you're signing up to return like a large amount of return. Right. Yeah. So it's like, you have to think about the IRR. If you have like an infinite amount of capital, and then, hey, you have your own personal thesis, and then you're deploying capital, based on your personal conviction or thesis, then it's like all fun, right? But then there's the other, aspect, which is the return to capital, and you have to generate these returns. And that's where you have to kind of like, so like ideally there's a overlapping area between your thesis and conviction and, those return areas that can return a lot of capital, but not always, right?
What was your role at Tapas? Were you in a creative role there?
No, so my background has always been building these publishing tools, content publishing tools. So I'm more like a product manager. I like to work with UX designers and engineers. So I'm more like a pure kind of product engineering side. But when you're building a content platform, there's always the other aspect, which is about the content and creator management and acquiring IPs. So I didn't have a background from that other world. So for those, we had to hire, talented people and then trusted them. So, my role has changed. Obviously, anytime you start a company and scale the company, your role as a founder keeps changing, right? So the first like couple of years, I think I was like full-time PM. Like I looked at every single kind of aspect of the product, and I designed the first product myself, and I did everything, obviously. But I was very involved in the product. And then as the company scaled more, then the company becomes your product. So how do you like build this machine where like you hire the best people, you continue motivating them? What kind of culture do you want to create? And what kind of process do you want to put in place so that like people don't step on each other's toes? So at some point, your product changes from the actual product to the company. And yeah, for me, I think that was around like, I would say like 70, 80 people mark. Until then, like you're kind of like still involved in day to day a lot. But then after like 80 people, then, you become like the company becomes more of your product, I think.
Yeah, but it does sound like you played a creative role because engineering a product is a very creative job if you're involved in it. And then it sounds like you applied the same mindset to a company. I loved how you said that the company becomes your product and then you build that. The reason I asked you that is because it's notoriously hard for natural creatives to switch to investing and actually enjoy it, because and I'm like that as well. I don't like investing and I'm not good at it. But I know from my experience and the experience of so many other people that we start feeling suffocated if we do investing instead of channeling our creativity towards building something. You sound much more like Steve Jobs to me than Warren Buffett.
Yeah, so I think it's like using different muscle, right? And the other thing to keep in mind is, and this was something that I took into consideration a lot when I was doing the soul searching part, is that no matter what you do, you have to think like, hey, long term, right? Because in order to build anything great, it has to be a long journey. So yeah, if you're a founder building a great company, if you think about like Airbnb, Uber, any company that you know, like Stripe, these are like 10 plus year companies, right? And then even the venture funds, you mentioned Altos before this call, because we're both good friends with them. And Altos is amazing. I mean, they're killing it.
Yeah.
But they've been around for like 20 plus years at this point. So anything that you think is like an overnight success actually takes a lot longer than you expect. So yeah, using different muscles, and anything that you do is a potentially long-term project, are the things that you have to keep in mind. Meaning, hey, if somebody wants to kind of transition from the founder role to the investor role, then you have to realize this is like a 10-year journey. So maybe like the first couple of years, you might have like the different kind of like, because you're using different muscle, there's always that discomfort. But you should remember that it's going to be a 10-year journey. So I might be like, hey, like this, I might have like I guess like a freshman, sophomore kind of difficulties, but then I'm not in this for like 2 years. I'm in this for 10 years. So hopefully that might be helpful.
Well, but if you start a new business, you better also plan for 10 years. So either way, it will be a marathon. And
Yes, absolutely.
it needs to be seriously considered if and when you're ready for it. And again, this whole healing and resting and traveling and expanding our horizons, I think it's just so important because we need to accumulate our energy first before we channel it somewhere.
Yeah, and the other thing, my theory is, my other theory is, you can't really put a deadline on soul searching. I mean, it's just very difficult. Like a lot of people, I mean, going back to the dating analogy, right? Nobody goes out there and then say, hey, I want to get married by a certain day, certain time. I mean, it should be the other way around. I mean, you don't think about the marriage necessarily, but, if you find the love and then like, then one thing leads to another, and naturally the outcome happens. So you really cannot put deadline on soul searching. So, but what you do is you kind of like, wait for the right moment until the voice comes finds you. And the other day somebody was telling me about the story of how like Newton, Einstein, like a lot of these scientists found the fundamental like the breakthrough theories when they are resting. But so like Newton, the apple falling from the tree, I mean, like That story actually tells you that Newton was sitting under the tree, which means that he was taking a rest.
Like
But then
Buddha.
if he was like sitting under the tree, yeah, exactly. So like if he was sitting under the tree for 10 years, and did he find the gravity? Probably not, right? Or like if he was in the lab the whole time, not sleeping, not eating, just thinking about the gravity, he probably wouldn't have been able to find the gravity either. So it'll have to be some sort of combination of like hard thinking and taking yourself out of it a little bit, taking a step back, taking a little rest. So you have to kind of get into the rhythm of like hard thinking. You still have to put in the work. I mean, you can't expect to find the great, truths without putting in the work first. So you have to kind of find the balance between putting the work and then sometimes taking a step back.
No, I absolutely agree with you. We need to create time and space for it first, and then actually do the work of thinking and maybe get bored. Because my observation is most people are so scared of facing their internal demons and so reluctant to do the work that what they do is either they just get very, very busy and tell themselves a story of why it's very important and how they already found their purpose and meaning and everything, or they accept some kind of memes, that's popular kind of band-aids, theories that other people seem to believe in, and then they put them as labels on their foreheads and they say, okay, I figured this out, this is my answer. But I think below the surface, what it is just this fear and reluctance to do the work, because our brain naturally resists a change and resists doing hard work if it can avoid it.
Yeah, even like simple questions like, what do you want to do in life? I mean, that's like the biggest, the most like difficult question ever. And yeah, you're right, absolutely right. Some people might be like giving their surface level answer, and then they never had a chance to kind of go deep into, inside themselves, and then they think that, hey, like this surface level answer is what I like, but then they never had an exercise where they're like facing themselves and then like kind of going deep into them. For me, what was really helpful was obviously talking to other people. So what I did as part of the sabbatical was just like, went out there and then talked to a lot of people. And I deliberately chose to talk to people, like a lot of people who are not part of my circle, like the tech, startup circle. Yeah. So, and LA is actually very good for that because you get to meet a lot of other, walks of life. Nothing serious, nothing like deep. It's just like you hang out with them and then, hey, how's everything going? How's your life? And one thing leads to another, and then you're having this conversation, and you just look at how other people live, and then that actually tells you a lot of stories that you can, use to kind of look at yourself. So yeah, for me, talking to a lot of people were. And not necessarily from the people from the same industry was really, really helpful.
So do you think your cultural background makes your journey somehow different from people from other cultural backgrounds that you talk to? I'm talking about exited founders.
I think so. So as a Korean, so like the way I got into the internet industry was by accident almost. My upbringing, so my father was a college professor, and he would regard like anybody who doesn't have PhD as a failure. So, the proverbial, like you have to be either a doctor or a lawyer really, really applied to, our household. So, when I was in college, I was a pre-med student. I was learning chemistry, biology, physics, without even knowing why I wanted to learn about those. I wanted to be a doctor, but not even knowing why. I mean, I had absolutely no reason other than, my father wanted me to be a doctor. Yeah. So, but I think at some point I was almost like fooling myself. It's like, oh yeah, like that's something that you want to do. But it wasn't true. And what happened after was because I'm a Korean citizen. I was a Korean citizen back then. Now I'm a U.S. citizen, but I had a Korean passport. And every male, like Korean men, has to go to army.
Yeah.
So after studying in the US, I had to go back to Korea to serve in the army. And this was during the dot-com boom. And what the Korean government had was this special program that let you actually work in internet companies instead of going to the army. So it was a select few people who had a job in those companies, certain companies. You get exempt, from the army duty. So I was like, all right, what is that program? I mean, I'd rather work in a big, or interesting companies rather than like going to the army and spending my next like 3 years. And then one thing led to another, and then I got a position at this internet company. Again, this was dot-com, boom, so like late 90s. And at that point, I had no idea. I didn't know anything about like startups or like technology, internet, nothing. But somehow I got the opportunity to work in this company, and it was like a real life MBA. I had to learn every single thing because I was one of the few, probably the only non-engineer at the company. The company was doing actually very well, and they eventually became a public company and so on and so forth. But in terms of like writing, business plan, raising money from investors, and eventually going to public market, like a lot of work fell onto me. And I remember like at that point I was like grumbling because it's like, oh my gosh, because I'm like doing my army duty, so I wasn't getting paid a lot of money. But I did a lot of work. And then I knew about nothing, so I had to learn every single thing. But in hindsight, that was a really, really good opportunity for me to learn about technology and how to run a company. And the other thing was, it was a really good experience for me to experience the the company, even though it wasn't my company. Of course, I was just doing my army duty there. But I could see the company growing really, really fast, and that was my very first job. So I have this theory where like the first job affects you a lot. Like like whatever like experience you get from your first job affects people more than they think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really, really good experience for me in terms of like startup, experiencing the startup secondhand. So kind of going back to your question about, hey, did the cultural background affect my decisions? Absolutely. And I think that's the case for everybody, right? Everybody has different background. Everybody goes through like different experience. But whatever experience you go through, like early in your career, I think that has a lot of impact in people. Yeah. And certainly was the case for me as well.
How about your post-exit experience? Do you think the way you look at the world, the way you think about what to do next, is affected also by your Korean heritage?
So I think people like me, post-exit founders, when they start another thing, I think more people, you can really say that you're really going for meaning and purpose more. And of course, that's what every founder says. They're mission driven. They're really going for mission and purpose. But the first time founders, they really want to have the exit under their belt. They really want to have a financial return. There's more strong pull from other motivations. Okay. But you're like starting the third company. The first couple companies luckily became successful. Then you don't necessarily need to prove yourself all the time, so you get free from that pressure. So I think when you say, hey, for this time I'm really optimizing for meaning and purpose, you mean that more than when you're starting your first company. So yeah, that's a difference. I would say it's really fulfilling. I mean, you're able to say like when you say you're going for meaning and purpose, you actually do mean it. I think that's really liberating.
You mentioned that you don't need to prove yourself anymore, yet I meet lots and lots of post-exit founders who are suffering from an imposter syndrome, or they basically feel they haven't really proved themselves, or they're afraid that they will be seen as one-trick pony and they will never be successful again. There's like this whole collection of self-doubt and insecurities that suddenly jump on these people. Do you have any of that?
What everybody has, right? I mean, no one is free from those imposter syndromes or like insecurities. I mean, no one. I mean, people can say that they don't have it, but then I don't really believe that. So everybody has that to a certain degree. But I think it's a conscious choice, right? I mean, just because you as human nature, you have the human nature doesn't mean that you have to be trapped inside the human nature all the time. So, I mean, during my sabbatical, when I looked at the people around me, they were like advancing in their career like super fast. And remember, like 2023, that was a year of generative AI, and a lot of my connections and friends, they started this awesome companies and immediately get like a super crazy like valuation and then raise big money, and then they announce that on LinkedIn and Twitter all the time. I have like a couple other people who joined the public company board, got recruited as a CXO, C-level suite, yeah, lots of things happened when I was taking time off, and then you get that feeling of like you feel like you're standing still, and then everybody else is like, jumping ahead and then running ahead. So you get that feeling, right? But I think it's really like where you set the sight. If you set the sight at somebody who is like, who you think is better than you, like advancing faster, then you always feel like you're falling behind, right? So like, I mean, we're talking about the post-exit founders, but then like, even if you sold your company at a $2 billion valuation, for example, you're still not Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, right? So if that person is setting the sight at, hey, compared to Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, I'm like nothing, then that person will probably be very unhappy. But then if they like look inwards and then, hey, we've been very successful, and then we've been, and when we look at the people around us, like important people, our family, friends, I can spend more time with them. I can provide for them better. It's like, I'm free from like these like small like stresses, like when you're financially not secure, there's always like those like small things that bother you, and then you don't have to think about those as much. That's really, really like blessing. So if you look at those positive aspects, and then it's really a matter of like where you set the sight at, I think.
Tell me how your exit affected your relationships with your wife.
Yeah, my wife, funny thing is like my wife actually helped out the company at the beginning. So she doesn't have like a work experience, a lot of work experience. So like after graduate school, we got married, and after we got married, we had a first child. So she didn't have like a lot of work experience. But when you're starting a new startup, I mean, it's like an all hands on deck situation, and we actually had a lot of like admin work to do because we were a creator platform, and we had to like pay out the creators, and we were sending like a bunch of PayPal transactions to the creators every month. So we needed some help. So my wife actually ended up helping out, doing a lot of admin stuff. So she was really, really critical at the start of the company. So yeah, after the exit, I remember still, it's like a small episode, but then like, we were traveling somewhere, and then we were about to close, but we never knew like what time the deal would close. But then, like one day I wake up, and then, the deal was closed, and then, we looked at the account, and then there's this, number that we didn't see before, and then, and then I woke up my wife, and then I didn't say anything, like no word, but then I just showed my phone to her, and she's like, hey, what is this? And then I just like, showed it to her. And then I remember like us like hugging like for like a little bit, and then we didn't say anything, but and for some weird reason I shook hands with her. I don't know why I did that, but it's like, we accomplished this together kind of thing, I guess. But then we had a little bit of a handshake, And then I went back to work actually. So no like a funny interesting story there, not necessarily, but yeah, we had a little bit of like the moment where, hey, like we worked on this project for such a long time, we did this together, but after that, life as usual.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3 kids.
Oh, wow. How old are they?
Yeah, so we had the first 2 kids when we were doing the second company, and then recently we had a newborn baby. So we have a huge age gap between the first and second child and the third child.
Are you considering being a full-time parent for a while, or you know it's not gonna be something you fulfilling for you?
I don't know about like, so last year I was pretty much a full-time dad. I did
Okay.
all the school rides. I did everything. Packed the lunch for the kids, everything. And I still try to like get involved as much as possible. Like I still do like a, ride duty. But then, yeah, the challenge is the newborn. We have a kind of live-in nanny, so she's helping out a lot. But during the weekends, we're
Yeah.
on our own. So anytime you have a newborn baby, it's always tough, right? But it's also a blessing too. Yeah, when you have a third child after a long while, it's a very different experience.
Yes.
Your expectation level is so low, meaning like when you have like first child, you're like, hey, you should do this, you shouldn't do this, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that you're expecting from the child, but then
Yeah.
third child, you don't want anything from. It's like just be healthy. Like, I don't care. Like I don't care what you do. Just be healthy.
Exactly, exactly. I have 3 kids
Yeah.
too, and my younger one is 10 years younger than the previous one. So I know
Oh
exactly what
wow.
you're talking about. I'm so relaxed,
Yeah.
but also I'm enjoying motherhood so much more because I'm not stressing out. I was quite a fanatical mom with the first one. And now, exactly as you said, I just want to love that child. I want him to feel loved and I want him to be healthy. That's it. And that's the end of my ambition. No
You know that's
helicopter parenting anytime soon.
Yeah, that's actually better for the child too, right? Because when you're under the pressure, like the kids feel it, right? It's like the
Yeah.
first child, always kind of feels that. But the second and third child, I mean, they know that there's less pressure,
Uh-huh.
which is better for them psychologically.
So, do you want your kids to be entrepreneurs when they grow up?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, my mantra is just like whatever they want to do in life, I want to support them. But so I think that as a parent, what you do is try to give them opportunities so that they can find, what they do, what they like, right? So I think that's a parent's role. Like when you try to like step more into that process and then try to do things for them, I mean, it just doesn't work, right? So you got to know when to step out, when to step in. And for me, it's always been like, giving them the opportunity, at least like, have them experience so that they can know what they like or not like. So yeah, that's part of the reason why we did a lot of traveling together as a family, especially last year because I took the time off. But even before that, we traveled a lot, reading, books. I like to read books, by the way. So like, when you as a parent likes to read, then kids tend to like, because it's one thing to tell the kids, hey, you have to read all the time, right? But then you're never reading, then it really
Yeah,
doesn't work.
doesn't
As
work.
opposed to like, you're like reading, and the kids can see that, and then they're kind of reading together with you. Yeah, so my mantra is always like, hey, let's like try to give them as much opportunity to experience different things, and then kind of let them figure out what they like and not like.
Fantastic. Is your wife also Korean?
Last time I checked, yes.
So, if you had to rate your level of fulfillment today, fulfillment, not just happiness, between 0 and 10, where are you?
I would say 9.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah,
that's the
9.
highest I've ever heard.
Oh,
Amazing.
really?
What do you think feeds into your fulfillment so well?
I have found what I want to do in life. Again, that was after a lot of thought, a lot of soul searching, a lot of mission finding. So I think I did put in a lot of work discover myself and what I want to do for the rest of my life. If you had the same question to me last year, let's say like May or June last year, the answer would have been different. I would probably have said like 4 or 5 because I was still like searching.
Yeah.
Yes. And like I said, I mean, the simple question of like, what do you want to do in life is the most like difficult question and the potentially stressful question. So I think I did go through some of those periods where I was feeling a little anxious. It's like, hey, I wanted to find what I want to do. Like I was giving myself a certain amount of time. It's like, hey, I knew that I wanted to take a year off, but then like I was hoping that by the end of the year, I knew very clearly what I wanted to do. And then as the clock was ticking, I had this like a psychological pressure of, oh yeah, like I better know what to do next because I was giving myself like a year, even though nobody told me. Like I could potentially take like 3 years off or 4 years off. I mean, no one told me you have to take exactly 1 year off. But then because that was sort of the amount of time that I was giving myself, I was kind of getting anxious towards like the later part of the year. But two things happened. One is, again, the child, the newborn baby. So we had a baby in December last year or so. Like my sabbatical kind of became like a paternity leave. There was no like a dividing line. It just became like the paternity leave. So I had to like take more time off. And then the other thing is finally, a lot of soul searching, a lot of mission finding. I was able to find the clarity. So now I feel like, hey, it's such a blessing because I know exactly what I want to do for the next like whatever years. And then the family's happy, we have a newborn baby, baby's healthy and growing. So yeah, there's absolutely no complaint. Everything's thankful. Like I'm just like, super grateful for everything.
So you said you know exactly what you want to do, and yet before you said you're still thinking about 3 different options. So for your peace of mind, it's sufficient to have a choice of 3, or you actually know exactly what you want to do and just don't want to tell me?
No, I'm getting back into the game. I'm building another company. Again, this will be my 3rd company. So it's funny because this year I'm doing 2, 0 to 1 project. Like one is the baby, literally 0 to 1, 0 years to 1 years old. And I'm doing a new company. But yeah, it's super early. So there's not much I can tell right now. So we're still like under stealth mode. But generally in the space of like helping people. So I want to stay in my background and experience, which is to build the content publishing tools for creators. That's been my thing the whole life, and I want to kind of do it again, but in a different way. So more again, optimized for meaning and purpose. So I want to build a content creation tool for people to share their professional wisdom and experience better. What does it actually mean? That's something that we have to figure out. So I don't really have like a lot of details yet, but just generally speaking, on a very high level, I want to help people. People like me actually. Like I like to share my experience, my unique experience. Is my experience like the best ever in the world? Like no. But is my experience very unique? Yes. So and everybody has had their unique experience and learning and wisdom captured. But a lot of those wisdom and experience and knowledge is still like trapped in people's head.
Yes.
So what if we can kind of like unlock more knowledge and wisdom and experience from people's head, especially for people like you and me who had the experience, right? So that's generally the space that I want to be in, and I want to create like a content creation tool for those people. But again, in terms of what it looks like, what does it actually mean? There's a lot of planning to do right now.
So it's content creation, not necessarily a platform for those people to share experiences.
It'll be a platform. Yeah.
It will be a platform, and it will have tools.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So you can be our user.
I would love that. I think it's so valuable. I want to be a guinea pig. Let me know when you need one.
No, you're right. I mean, social media today, that's the role of social media. But as you know, social media, we need better social media tools, like in general, especially for young generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need just better social networking, social media tool, more meaningful, tools. And even though there's a lot of tools out there, we're still kind of like, in terms of content creation, it's not always easy for everybody. Like you have your podcast and YouTube channels. Yeah, absolutely. There's no shortage of tools out there. Like there's newsletter, there's Medium, there's a podcast, there's YouTube. But for a lot of people, starting a new podcast channel or YouTube channel is kind of daunting. It's not easy
Yeah.
all the
It's
time
still not easy,
for
I agree
everyone.
with you. Yeah, it's still not easy. There is still a lot of simplification that could be done. Combining all these different things, the podcast and a newsletter. The ultimate dream of any creator would be like, push two buttons and it's there, right? And we are very far from that, I think.
Yeah, so there's the tools, and also there are motivation. There's motivation too, or knowledge, right? So a lot of people don't know how to create content, even though there are many tools available. So they just don't know where to start. So yeah, if we can make the content creation process much easier, where maybe they can be prompted, maybe there can be like a easier to use tools, whatever it means. If we can, make the barrier lower, so that more people can share more knowledge and wisdom, I think it can be very meaningful thing.
And that's what motivates you.
Yes.
I love it.
And part of that came from my own experience. So last year, during my sabbatical, I was trying to share my experience to other people. I invested in about 55 companies and funds, mostly the founders that I knew from before. So I did a ton of angel investing, and of course I try to mentor and help other founders as much as possible, which was a really fulfilling experience for me. Of course, it's tiring and it's a sometimes big time commitment. So I couldn't help everybody, of course.
Yeah.
But of the ones that I was trying to help, I was trying to really help them, kind of by sharing my own experience. And the other thing was during my sabbatical, in terms of finding what to work next, the number one question that really helped me was, hey, if I had 5 years to live, what would I do? So I thought about the question a lot, and I was imagining, visualizing myself. It's hey, I go to the doctor's office, and the doctor gives me the unfortunate news, hey, you only have 5 years. Then what would I do? The first thing I was thinking was maybe I would try to dump everything in my brain, whatever I learned from my professional experience, whatever I experienced and wisdom and learning. I would try to get them out of my brain and then kind of try to capture in some ways. It can be books, or it can be blog posts, it can be newsletter, it can be whatever. But I didn't want to kind of die with all these things trapped in my head, unshared. So yeah, based on those, those findings, so my desire to share, and then the fulfillment of that I felt when I was actually sharing with other founders. These were kind of motivation and inspiration for me to think about this platform where, hey, what if not just me sharing my experience and knowledge, but allowing other people to share their experience and knowledge better. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning.
Fantastic. Best of luck with that one.
Yeah, thank you. But we don't have anything. We don't have product. We don't have nothing. So
It's okay.
yeah, we'll see.
But you have all the experience, and you're actually driven by the mission, as you said before, genuinely driven by the mission, as opposed to just getting more money, which means that you will be focusing on what people actually need as opposed to some artificial metrics in attempt to raise money. Talking about that, by the way, do you think you would go and raise money for this company?
Not for the beginning. I think we'll bootstrap the company at the beginning, but at some point, yes. I mean, going out and raising money is great because that's the only time when you get the honest feedback, right? You need to go out there and raise money from VCs. Yeah, because like a lot of people around me, because I was again luckily successful in my previous companies. Whatever I say, a lot of times people say, "Oh yeah, that's a brilliant idea," but I know that it's not brilliant. It's like stupid sometimes. So I need like a very honest opinion. And by the way, I have like friends who give me like super honest feedback, and I'm like forever grateful for them. I think as you get older, you need those friends who can say anything, and I feel like I'm lucky because I do have those friends. But like weaker connections, like the people that I meet in a professional setting, a lot of them say like, "Oh yeah, like you must know what you're doing because you have the previous experience." But not necessarily, right? Like I know like a lot of my ideas are stupid, so I need like an unvarnished opinion and feedback. And oftentimes, that comes from the investors who need to deploy the capital, and their capital is on the line, and they can be like super honest in that moment.
If you talk to somebody who just sold a company and were at that level of 4, 5 where you were a year ago of fulfillment, what would you suggest they do, or what lessons you would share?
My first advice would again like slow things down, because like a lot of successful people, they have the tendency to kind of bring their momentum, like previous muscle memory, into this. In other words, they try to like treat this like soul searching process as another project. But this is different. You have to unwind. You have to kind of wait until the voice comes to you, not the other way around. So you have to kind of like still put in the work. You have to read books. You have to talk to a lot of people, and so on and so forth. You have to do like those walks and like talks with yourself. So put in the work, but then don't like try to rush things or try to put a deadline to this, but rather be patient and be very like sensitive to your like small inner voice. Yeah, you gotta stay sensitive because these findings oftentimes start from a very small voice inside you. But if you're not sensitive enough, you can't listen to that. You might just miss it, right? So you gotta stay very sensitive. Yeah, so my number one tip would be, hey, take things slowly. Don't approach this as another project with a clear deadline. So that's number one. Number two, like I said, I mean, for me, talking to a bunch of other people, especially the ones who are not necessarily like very close to you or do the same things that you do, was really helpful. So go out there, talk to a lot of people. And reading is actually, my opinion is reading, of course, like depends on like what type of books you're reading, but reading is almost like a similar experience as talking to people, because you get to learn about other people's life, and then you get to see how other people dealt with the experience, circumstances. So it's almost equivalent to like talking to a bunch of people. So yeah, either like talk to actual people or try to read books where you can learn about other people's life. By far, that was the biggest or the best experience in terms of like being able to see myself, being able to kind of like use other people's stories as a way to reflect. You try to see your own reflection in there. Yeah, so those two would be my tips for them.
Any particular books or biographies that you would recommend?
There's too many. So I have this like tendency to buy a lot of books when I go to like Barnes and Noble. I just like buy books a lot, and then I never read them because I never I didn't have time. But finally I was able to like tackle read all these books last year, and The kind of books that I really liked, or again, where I could see other people's life.
Yeah.
So like I really enjoyed Warren Buffett book, The Snowball.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed some other books where I could like, literally it's like, it feels like, I'm walking with that person
Yeah.
kind of books. I'm not saying like that's the best book ever, but like in terms of like talking to random strangers, one book that I read is called Hangry. Hangry. So that's a book written by the Grubhub founder, and it's an interesting book because this guy, after selling the company, so he's talking about his like company like lessons learned and everything, but then also he's going on this bike trip from the east coast of the U.S. to the west coast. So it's a cross continental bike trip, and then the book is like kind of like juxtaposing the learnings from the company with the bike trip, road trip. And then he's talking about how like talking to the people that he met, during the bike trip, kind of helped transform, his thoughts. So that was really fascinating. I didn't set out to like do the road trip, like bike trip across the country, but I did want to kind of get out of my comfort zone. I have these people that I always talk with, and I continue talking with them. I mean, there are people that I could just like pick up the phone and then call anytime. So it's
Yeah.
important for you to have those people as well. But sometimes you have to kind of get out of your comfort zone and then talk to people who are walking different, paths
Yeah.
than compared to you. So for me, again, like it's, kind of going outside of the tech bubble was really interesting and helpful experience.
So this gets me to my last question. How do
Yeah.
you want to be remembered?
I mean, there's two different levels, right? Be remembered in general, like a Wikipedia entry of some sort, or be remembered by the people close to you. And as I get older, I think that I am more interested in the latter, not the former. So yeah, I get to think a lot about how would my children remember me. So or whoever is like close to me will remember me. So I get to like think a lot more of those aspects than like how would I be remembered in general. So yeah, I want to be remembered as caring person who were always trying to make time for the important people. I want to be remembered as somebody who is generally busy, but when it comes to like one-on-one conversations, I don't rush. I'm there for them, and so that's like a relationship piece. Again, the second bucket of like how do I want to be remembered by the people around me? People, or like the first bucket, like how do I want to be remembered in general? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I always care about the startups. I build startups. I help other startups. So I guess the tagline for me would be somebody who really like, cared about like solving the world's problem through either like starting his own company or helping other entrepreneurs. Yeah, so I would be remembered as I guess my work, for the first bucket. So hopefully this new company or in the future I might start other things will kind of define help define my legacy or how I will be remembered in general. But like I said, I mean, as I get older, I care a lot more about the second bucket, which is how other people around me will remember me. And I don't know. I don't have like a really good answer there. I guess it's a really good question. I need to kind of think about it a little more. But yeah, so far that's what I'm thinking.
No, but I love how human and raw and genuine your answer is.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, CK. I really enjoyed the interview. I could go on for hours, but I'm being mindful of your time. Maybe we can do
Yeah,
it
thank you so much.
another time.
Yeah, I really
Excellent.
enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.